How do I know if I've shifted into a new reality? What does shifting into a new reality even mean? Is shifting realities the same thing as shifting timelines? What is all of this? I'm going to break down for you what it really means to shift a reality. I'll talk about, is it possible to interact with people who are in different realities than you are? Is it possible to be between realities? Is it possible to revert back to an old reality? And how does this all play a role in our ability to manifest? First, I want you to understand that the reality you live in is dependent on the conscious vibration you are emitting. What is the consciousness level that you are vibrating the most at? And to understand what a conscious vibration is, what is your level of consciousness? It relates to your feeling state. What is your primary feeling state that you carry with you? And some of us may actually be very unconscious to the frequency that we are emitting. Because let's face it, there's a lot of unconscious humans on this planet. And the unconscious humans who are unaware of the vibrations that they are emitting, the frequency that they are emitting, they're living in a separate reality. They live in their own reality. The way they view the world and perceive the world is different than someone who's operating on a different consciousness level. Let's break it down. You've heard the terms 3D, 4D, 5D, and beyond. What does that mean? So let's just start by looking at what are the vibrations, the frequencies, the energies, the emotions that are in the third dimensional reality. What consumes people who are living in the third dimensional reality? Fear, anger, desire, pride, shame, grief, guilt. Very low vibrational frequencies. What does that do to the physical body? Causes inflammation, autoimmune disorders, chronic pain, sleeping, and nutritional issues, anxiety. And how is this shown in our behavior? People-pleasing, narcissism, addiction, deception, manipulation. It's also characterized by living in a constant state of stress. Think of the 4 trauma responses that I usually talk about: fight, flight, fawn, and freeze. Would you know it? That approximately 80% of the world's population is living in the third dimensional reality. And for the most part, that's where our governmental systems like to keep us. They like to keep us in fear. They like to keep us in grief. They like to keep us in guilt and shame. They like to keep us sick. They like to keep us anxious and unwell, because that requires us to depend on them even more. We've just become so accustomed to that way of living that that appears to be the norm. Now, we can't just jump right from the third dimensional reality up to the 5th. What you don't hear people talk as much about is the 4th dimension, because the 4th dimension is a little boring. The 4th dimension requires something very specific in one's vibration in order to ascend to the next level of reality. 3 things. The first is courage. Now, down in the 3rd dimension, there is that energy of desire. There is a want. And unless that desire is met with courage, it'll dissolve back into nothing. Because that desire can often be met with anger or fear or guilt or shame. That desire for change, for something different, must be met with the courage. And that courage must be met with trust and faith. Because the 4th dimension is a period of, it doesn't appear like much is happening. It is a period that can be boring. It is a period of rebooting the system. Because down in the 3rd dimension, what you realize is it's a virus. A virus has overtaken you. And in order to get to that next operating system up there in the fifth dimension, where things are just like working way more efficiently and effectively, you got to go through the reboot. And that's in the fourth dimension. And the reboot requires a whole reprogramming of the system. And that can take a while. You see it loading, one thing is done loading, and then another one comes in, and another one, and another one. You wonder, how many updates do I have to go through? This is taking days, this is taking weeks, this is taking months, this is taking years. And it's very easy to say, forget it. I don't care about all these updates. I just need to go back to operating. I don't have time for all this, and return back into third dimensional realm. There's a level of pride. I don't have time for this. I got too much to do. I have money that I need to make. I don't have time to wait around. There's an impatience. Courage understands that it also requires patience. And that patience is rooted in trust and faith. On top of that, there must be a willingness in the fourth dimension for you to even ascend up to the fifth dimensional reality. A willingness to adopt a new belief system. Because you cannot go around in the fifth dimension with third dimensional beliefs. Doesn't work that way. This is why your system has to reboot itself. It needs to learn new ways of thinking so that it can see the truths that exist in the other realities. This is also a time when you're learning healthy boundaries. And because you're learning healthy boundaries, you're losing a lot of people from your life. It's a total cleanup of your system. There's things on your desktop that you don't need anymore. There's files that have become corrupt and they need to be put in the trash and deleted forever. You have to be willing to face your own shadow. You have to be willing to recognize the faults in your own belief systems. You have to be willing to recognize the judgments that you have formed on other people and yourself. You have to be willing to take personal responsibility for everything that's happened in your life. You have to be willing to slow down. Because what was happening in that third dimensional reality burned you out, stressed you out. This rebooting of the system is also a nervous system reset. And in order to reset your nervous system requires a lot of slow and soft living, mindful living. You are preparing yourself for the fifth dimension, which is a life of mindfulness. You are moving from the third dimension that was rooted in ego, and you are moving up into a reality that is rooted and supported by spirit, by your heart, not your head. Because the fourth dimension is sort of a period of being in limbo, don't underestimate the work that is happening behind the scenes. You must learn to adopt a neutral attitude. Without the attitude of neutrality, you will go back down in the third dimensional reality. Neutrality means non-judgment, not lack of discernment. No, you are growing discernment, but you are learning the art of having a non-judgmental attitude, which stems from these new beliefs that you are forming. You are also learning the art of non-attachment, because the third dimensional reality relies upon material goods. It relies on getting. It relies on achieving. It relies on consumerism and capitalism. The fifth dimensional reality has let go of all attachments. It no longer has a desire for achievement, for getting, for material items. The perception of achievement is much different from a fifth dimensional reality than the view of achievement from the third dimension. So you know you're shifting realities when you're shifting what is deemed to be meaningful and purposeful and important for you in your life. Once you do reach the fifth dimension, which can take a while, you're in the fourth and you might think you're in the fifth, but the fourth is the big testing ground. It's a very big testing period for your patience because it can take a while. But once you have reached that fifth dimension, you have reached the vibrational frequency that you are spending the majority of your time in, which is acceptance. Yes, you may still experience grief, anger, guilt, shame, fear, but those emotions no longer give you anxiety. Now, when you feel those emotions, you meet them with love and acceptance and understanding. You understand that your feelings are information. They no longer fool you into thinking that you're doing something wrong or that something's wrong with you. They inform you about your own personal needs. That acceptance is unwavering in the fifth dimension. Acceptance of yourself, because now you are seeing the truth of the reality that you now live in, where once you had questioned, where once you were not sure if things were really going to work out, but you always had the faith and the trust that they would. And they did, and they are, and they will continue to be so long as you don't get pulled back down into the third dimensional realm, which can happen. You can lose your faith very easily. You can be fooled by the ego that what you're doing is wrong, because not a lot of people are willing to do what you're doing. Not a lot of people are willing to enter a new reality. They don't believe that there is anything else other than what they currently see. But once you have entered into that fifth dimensional reality, all of those aches and pains have been alleviated. You are now experiencing a soft and calm and relaxed energy. The things that would bring you anxiety before don't anymore. And it is that unwavering acceptance that you have come to land upon. Now, yes, there are 6, 7, 8, 12 dimensional realities that exist. Just as it's not serving you as a human to stay in the third dimensional reality, it also really wouldn't serve you to be staying in a 12th or 8th dimensional reality, because you become even more disconnected from the majority of people who live on this planet who are in the third dimension. Now, staying up too high might bring on a spiritual psychosis, might speak to spiritual bypassing of your human form. It's very important to stay in that neutral zone. The fourth dimension is not a bad place to be either. That energy of neutrality is one that you always want to come back to. Baseline of neutrality in the fourth. But with that, you have adopted and understood and learned and perceived the truth about acceptance, about love, and reason. You understand that there is a reason for everything. You understand that everything that you've been through had to have happened in order for you to get to where you are now. So this is now bringing up the point of, how do I now interact with people who are not at the same level as me yet? And that is an important concept to understand. They're just not there yet. And they might not be there yet in this lifetime. It doesn't mean that they can't be in another lifetime if you believe in that. And that sort of brings us to the timelines that we are living on. Have you entered your next timeline? Have you entered your next mission for which you are here for on this planet Earth? You started, everyone starts in that third dimension. In your lifetime, will you shift to the new timeline that you were brought here for? There is no regret. There is no resentment. All of that has been left away. If it does come up, it's met with love. It's met with understanding. It's not met with fear or anger or pride. One thing that is a word of warning for people who want to shift a timeline, shift into another reality, is that you're going to be very alone, because not a lot of people are doing that. Remember, the majority of the people are in the third dimension. It's going to be harder for you to find people like you. It's going to be more difficult for you to align with people who are in your new reality. They might fool you to believe. It might appear that they are. It might appear that they are. But the way you're going to know is by listening to them speak. When you listen to them speak, are they speaking from a place of pride? Do you hear them speaking from a place of guilting others, guilting themselves, shaming others, shaming themselves, being angry, being fearful, being anxious? If those things are happening and you hear that the majority of the time from them, that is the majority of their speech, then you know they are in the third dimensional realm. But if you listen closer and you hear the majority of the time, they're coming from a neutral standpoint. They're coming from a willingness to learn. They're coming from a willingness to be open-minded and curious. They're leading from their heart. You can tell they have the courage to do something different. And they're curious about what will happen. Then you know they are in that fourth dimension of living, that fourth dimensional reality. Now, the key word is majority of the time, because it's quite normal to get angry. Yes. But then you bring it back into courage and willingness and a neutral attitude. Do you have the capacity to do that? If you don't have the capacity to do that, you're continuing to maintain the third dimensional realm. Yes, I will experience grief, but do I have the capacity to move myself up into acceptance? Or do I keep it down in anger and fear? Then I'm maintaining that third dimensional reality. Yes, I will experience anxiety, but do I allow myself to stay there for prolonged periods of time? Is that a state of my being? Or am I able to neutralize it? Am I able to balance it? Am I able to tend to my needs? Because remember, again, feelings are information. And if you're tuning into your feelings, you have become at least someone who is living in the fourth dimensional reality. Because people in the third dimension, they do not tune into their emotions. They are cut off from their emotions. They do not want to be vulnerable with their emotions. Emotions are a weakness. However, for those who are operating in higher vibrational fields, they understand that emotions are a portal to leading you to your life's purpose and your life's mission. If you are someone who is trying to manifest something into your life, none of that will happen from the third dimension. If you're wondering why things are never working out for you, is because you're living from the third dimensional realm. But you may call it a coincidence. You may call it getting lucky. And if you see it in that way, then you are still in the third dimensional reality. But if something does happen to you that you had been thinking about, that you have been drawn to, and you see it as something as a result of your positive energy and vibration that you were responsible for, then you're operating in those higher realms. You know that you have this power because the third dimension is powerless. Remember, it's powered by the ego that doesn't want you to know your power. As we get up into the higher realms, we understand that the ego needs to take a back seat. The ego's work is done. We thank the ego. We say, thank you. You have taught me many things. You have served me well for as long as you could. But now it's time for my higher self, for my spirit, for my sage, for my wise self to take over now. Because now it's time for the soft energy. Now it's time for the neutral energy. Now it's time to be seeking things from the heart energy. And that you shall do. And that is how you know you're shifting into a new reality.